What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a fun one because it's another physical media community challenge, and this time it is presented from TimTalksTalkies. Tim wants to know our top 25 favorite films from the 80s. Now, I personally was born in 1980, so I grew up during this time period of the 80s and the 90s, and I just love these movies so much because it seems like during this decade, especially of the 80s, they're just more magical. These movies are on a different level and they just mean so much to me, especially because when I was 8 and 9 years old, I've told this story before, but I'm not sure if a lot of you know the story or not. But this is really where my love of movies began. When I was 8 and 9 years old, I broke my leg twice, back to back. I was in a hospital bed, I had a full body cast on, and I really couldn't do much. So my mom rented a lot of movies for me. Mama Blu-ray would rent movies from Video Galaxy, and that's before Blockbuster existed. So our little video rental store was Video Galaxy, and she would rent movies for me. And pretty much all of the films sitting next to me that are on my list, this is when I was first exposed to all of these classic 80s films. So that's the reason why they mean so much to me, because these are the movies that I watched over and over and over again because I had nothing else to do. I was stuck in a bed. All right, enough of the story time. I know you guys want me to get into my list, but really quickly before I do, if you guys want to participate at home, you absolutely can, because Tim wants as many lists as possible. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to link his video down in the description box so you can head on over there and get all the rules and regulations of what to do and when and what's going to happen, so that way you can participate as well and you know exactly where to send your list to Tim. All right, let's get this started. What are my top 25 films from the 80s? So starting off at number 25, I do not have the physical media copy of 25 and 24, unfortunately, but I will show you guys the picture sitting next to me. So starting off at number 25, I am beginning with Short Circuit. Short Circuit is just such a fun and cute movie. I watched it on repeat, and pretty much I believe this is the first time I ever fell in love with a robot. You fall in love with an inanimate object. Am I saying that correctly? Something that isn't real, but you just fall in love with number 5. And God, I wish I had that on DVD or something. Maybe I'll buy it. I'm not sure, but I haven't seen it in a really long time. But I remember absolutely loving and adoring Short Circuit. So moving on to number 24, it is Splash. This was the time period where I really fell in love with mythological creatures like unicorns and mermaids, and obviously Splash falls into that category. You have Tom Hanks and Daryl Hannah. I loved this film. I adored this movie so much. I remember watching it all the time. I think Mama Blu-ray got sick of renting it for me, but that's okay. She loved me so much, she didn't really mind. All right. My list is right next to me. So when I'm looking over, I'm looking at my list. So now everything else I have physical media copies of that I could show you. All right, so number 23, this is a brand new favorite. I don't have a history with this film, but I recently watched it for the first time, I believe around a year ago. It does have my man Nicolas Cage, but that's not the reason why. It's a bonus, but it's not the reason why it's in my top 25. But it's Valley Girl. When I saw this for the very first time, I completely adored it, because I'm a sucker for movies with love stories where you have kids that are on opposite sides of the tracks, like they should be together, but they shouldn't. There's an obstacle. I just go goo goo gaga for those kinds of love stories, and this is definitely one of those, because you have the girl from the valley, you have the guy from Hollywood who's Nicolas Cage, and they meet under, like fated circumstance, and they're trying to get together throughout the entire movie, and then they do, and then their friends want to rip them apart. I love this movie. This is a brand new 80s favorite of mine. I'm so happy that I discovered this not too long ago. I love the slipcover, and I had to put it into my list. I had to. Love it. This is Nicolas Cage's first starring role, so that's a bonus as well. He's adorable in this movie, by the way. All right, moving on to number 22. It's Space Camp. Does anyone else remember Space Camp? The reason why this one is on my list, not only because I watched it over and over again, but I watched it over and over again with Mama Blu-ray. My mom is a sucker for anything to do with space, anything to do with the solar system, like anything with space, with NASA. She is a sucker. And so when she rented this movie for the first time and we watched it for the very first time together, she fell in love with this movie, and so did I. I have great memories of watching this with my mom, and it has a young Joaquin Phoenix in here. How can you not love this movie? And this is a Kino Lorber, by the way. So if you guys are interested in picking up this Blu-ray, Kino Lorber has this for you. So I knew right away when this list came out that Space Camp absolutely had to make it into the top 25. All right, so that was 22. Now we're getting to number 21 with Overboard, a classic 80s comedy with Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell. What's not to like about this movie? Their chemistry. Obviously, they've been together since like the Pilgrims came over. They're one of the longest lasting couples in Hollywood. Never got married. That's probably the reason why they're one of the longest lasting couples, because they never tied the knot. But in this movie, their chemistry is off the charts. It's such a fun, ridiculous situation as the plot of this film, and I love it. It's one of the best comedies to come out of the 80s. So I love rewatching this one, and I like this slipcover a lot. All right. Moving on to number 20, the top 20. Okay, here we go. We've got The Karate Kid. Maybe a little shocking that Karate Kid is kind of lower on my list. I knew I had to fit it in there somewhere. It's not an 80s list if you don't have The Karate Kid. But I wasn't like the biggest fan of The Karate Kid, but I do enjoy the story. It's all about overcoming the obstacles, and you can do it, you can achieve it. You have, Mr. Miyagi in your corner. What's not to love about that? The overall message of the story is great. The underdog, winning in the end and everything. It's a great story. So how can you not include The Karate Kid? All right. Number 19 is probably the most horror of a film that's going to be on my list. And speaking of horror, I forgot to mention this. I don't have any horror films on my list, like real horror films. No horror films are on my list because back then I didn't watch horror. So these are all movies from when I was 8 and 9 years old. Not now, because I'm a recent fan of the horror genre. So no horror and really no action films either, just to let you guys know. All right, so number 19 is pretty much the most horror film you're going to see on my list. And it's Beetlejuice. I love the Steelbook. Ooh, you flip it. There you go. The main reason why I love Beetlejuice is because at that time, it was so creative and so outside of the box, especially when you're like 8, 9 years old and you're watching this for the very first time. And I'm thinking, what's in front of me as I'm watching this? But I was just so engrossed in it and I loved it. Tim Burton's style, you can spot it a mile away and it's very obvious and apparent in Beetlejuice. And Michael Keaton's performance as Beetlejuice is so legendary. I mean, you just gotta love it. So I'm looking forward to Beetlejuice 2. Fingers crossed, by the way, that it lives up to the original, because the original is just so darn good. It's just so darn good. All right. Coming in at number 18, next on the list, we have Ferris Bueller's Day Off. This one is good. I know it's lower on my list for being a John Hughes, but I feel like this one, I guess I'm the least attached to for some reason. But the reason why it is on the list is because what kid hasn't had, the fantasy of taking a day off and doing whatever they want, going wherever they want to go and taking their friends. And I mean, every kid has thought that. And you get to live vicariously through Matthew Broderick in this movie and just experience the wildest day possible and then be home by 6 o'clock. You know what I mean? So that's why Ferris Bueller's Day Off is just so good. It's John Hughes. I had to put it on the list somewhere. All right. Coming in at number 17, we have Steel Magnolias. I love and adore this movie. This is a great Mother's Day. There's a motorcycle outside. Did you guys hear that? This is a great Mother's Day movie. Fantastic film to watch with your mother, with your grandma, with your sisters. The reason why this one is on my list is because the relationship that Sally Field and Julia Roberts have in this movie as mother and daughter really, really reminds me of my mom and I. Because their love in this movie, even though they bicker, their love for each other in this film is so strong. And that is what reminds me of my mother and I, because we don't really bicker. We're more friends now that, you know, I'm an adult, I'm grown. We're more like best friends. But the love, the bond, and the end, I can't get through this movie without crying. It happens every single time because Sally Field's performance is so powerful and so emotional in this movie. I could start crying right now. Do you hear? Do you hear? Do you see me kind of like tearing up just a little bit? Just thinking about this movie gets me emotional. But that's the reason why it makes my list, because the bond between Mama Blu-ray and I. All right, let's move on. I can't get emotional. Okay. Number 16. I'm not good with numbers going backwards, so that's why I'm looking at my list constantly. All right, here we go. Number 16. It's the Goonies. How can the Goonies not be on everyone's list? Who did not see the Goonies 100 times during the 80s? This was one of the movies that I think defined the 80s. You have a wonderful all-star mini little cast before they were super famous. It's just an awesome movie. And like I mentioned in my video a couple of days ago, I used to play adventure out in my backyard after I saw the Goonies, and I would pretend that I was a part of the group. I mean, that's how much this movie had an effect on me. I went to the backyard and used my imagination. That's what kids did in the 80s, because we didn't have cell phones or computers or iPods or iPads or any of that stuff. We had to use our brains, and the Goonies was a big inspiration for that. And I've seen this movie so many times. It's just iconic. It's one of those movies from the 80s. You mention 80s movies, Goonies, you automatically say it. It's one of those. Okay, breaking into the top 15. At number 15, we have Just One of the Guys. I love this movie. I feel like as far as 80s movies go, it's severely underrated because, like I said with the Goonies, you say 80s films, you say Breakfast Club, you say Back to the Future, you say Goonies. Not really does anyone say Just One of the Guys. And I'm not sure a lot of people even know what this movie is about, but I will promote it until the end of time because I enjoy it and I think it's funny. It is a comedy. I wouldn't call it a rom-com. It is mainly a comedy, but there is a little bit of romance in the movie, especially the middle to the end. The romance develops. There's a great villain in here, William Zabka, who we know as Johnny from The Karate Kid. He's the villain in this movie. Is he in here on the cover anywhere? I don't see him, but he's in this movie. It's a great concept. You have a teenage girl who wants to win, there we go, a writing contest. She submits her work, or like journalism. She's trying to become a journalist. And if she wins this contest, she can get an internship, I believe, at like the local paper or some bullshit. So she submits her work. She gets rejected pretty much because she's not a boy. So she goes to the opposing high school in her town dressed as a guy. She completely changes everything about her look. And because she's like, I'm like going on and on about this movie, I apologize, but she changes her look. She's a complete girly girl beforehand. And this is how she looks after. When she changes her look, she turns into a dude. There we go. Cuts her hair, changes her clothes, and becomes a boy to see if she can win the contest at the other high school. So that's what this movie's all about. But the standout of this movie is her brother. Her brother, I have no idea the actor's name. Billy Jacoby, I think that's his name. The brother character is the most hilarious part about this movie. Anytime he's on screen, I'm laughing my ass off. So I'm going to stop talking about just one of the guys. I'm rambling, but this one is so underrated and hilarious. Check it out. It is awesome. It's a great 80s movie. Okay, coming in at number 14, another fantastic comedy. We have National Lampoon's Vacation. This just came out on 4K. Obviously, there we go. Just picked this up and I rewatched it the other night. It looked great and it still holds up. What's great about John Hughes, and did he write this or did he produce this? Hold on. Before I say what I'm going to say, I have to look something up really quick. Did he write this? Yes. Okay. What's great about John Hughes, I didn't know if he wrote it or produced it. So yes, he did write this. John Hughes in his writing, he takes very simple concepts and he just makes them into such a relatable subject. You have a family of four that's just trying to go on vacation. They're just trying to go on vacation for 2 weeks. And every single obstacle possible gets in their way. And they're trying to go around it, trying to reach their destination. And when they do, the ultimate obstacle is in their way. And it is just, it's a simple concept, but it's relatable and it's hysterical. So National Lampoon's Vacation, number 14. All right. Number 13. You're going to start to see a trend because number 13 is 16 Candles. And this is my 16 Candles from Arrow. I love the slipcover. I love and adore John Hughes. I'm not going to deny it. I'm probably going to have a John Hughes movie watching month for my theme because I just love him so very much. I love his work. 16 Candles is one of those movies that as like a young teenager going into those years, like in the 90s, when I was really watching this film a lot, it's so relatable. I mean, you have the overall concept of your family forgetting your birthday, your 16th birthday. Why did I say it like that? Your 16th birthday. Why did I go up an octave? I have no idea. Anyway, your 16th birthday, one of the most important birthdays you're ever going to have, and your family forgets about it. But what's really relatable is that our lead character of Molly Ringwald has the biggest crush on the most gorgeous guy in the school, probably because it's a 24-year-old playing a teenager in this movie, but who cares? She's in love with Jake Ryan in this movie. And what she doesn't know, though, is that he's kind of digging her, too. This gave us hope, people. This gave us hope. This movie gave us hope that possibly the football player in school might notice me, too. That's what I love about this film. The relatability. The relatability about having a crush on someone that you think is unattainable, but maybe they actually have a crush on you, too. So 16 Candles had to make my list. All right. I was kind of weird with that description. I apologize. I know I'm kind of rambling. I'm going to try to kick it up a notch. Okay. Number 12. Mannequin. I lived for Mannequin. I just love the concept of a mannequin coming to life for some reason. Also, it's starring Andrew McCarthy. And I adored him during this time period. So that was another bonus. But with Andrew McCarthy and also mannequins just spontaneously coming to life in a department store, I thought it was an interesting concept. And I've seen this movie so many times. So Mannequin definitely had to make the list. All right, so that's the top whatever to number 12. Okay. I'm just going off the rails in this video. We're just going to continue because I'm not starting over. Okay. Number 11. This almost made the top 10. It didn't make it. I'm surprised it didn't make it because it is Moonstruck. I've talked about Moonstruck so many times here on this channel. I will promote this movie until the end of time, just like Just One of the Guys. I love Moonstruck. And Nicolas Cage being in this movie has nothing to do with the reason. It's a bonus, but it's not the reason. The reason why I love this movie is because it's all about an Italian-American family, and the way that this family is portrayed in this movie, I love it. And the reason why I love it is because it is so accurate. The way the house looks, the way the family reacts to news that she has to tell them. I laugh every single time because I know it's true. I grew up in an Italian household. I know how it is. So that's the reason why I love this film. Cher won the Oscar for this. Very much appropriate because she gives a fantastic performance. And like I said, Nicolas Cage is just a bonus of being in this movie. And their budding relationship in this film is fantastic. So Moonstruck, absolutely. All right, so now we are in the top 10 80s films. Very exciting. All right, number 10. Number 10 is Coming to America. I have said it before, and I think I'm going to stand by it, that Coming to America is my favorite comedy of all time. I have seen this film over and over so many times. I know what's coming up, and it gets me. I laugh every single time. Even though I know what's going to happen, I know the joke, I know the gag, it doesn't matter. This movie entertains, and it's an awesome looking steelbook too, by the way. Eddie Murphy is fantastic in this part. It's really a shame that the sequel that they did for this film not too long ago really didn't impress me, because they had such magic with this film and they just weren't able to recreate that. This was like lightning in a bottle, obviously, and it's just wonderful. I love it. I will always love it. Okay, number nine. We're going to go with Batman 89. And I love the steelbook because the front, but the back is what's really awesome. I love this steelbook. So Batman 89, it's Michael Keaton and also Jack Nicholson, but this was my first Batman. I also believe this was my first superhero movie that I ever watched. So I have a special attachment with this film. I always will. I'll always love Michael Keaton in this role. He's on a few movies on my list. We got this, Beetlejuice. Michael Keaton was very prevalent in the 80s for me, as far as my list goes. But I almost picked Mr. Mom, by the way, too, but I didn't. That almost made the cut. But Batman 89, it's so special to me for that reason. My first Batman, my first superhero movie. So enough said. Enough said with Batman 89. All right. Number 8. Another awesome steelbook. We've got Heathers with Winona Ryder and Christian Slater. So this movie, when I saw it for the very first time, I was very confused by it. I wasn't sure what the hell I was watching. Remember, I was younger. I was, like maybe 9 or 10 when I first watched this. And I was like, what is this? But the more I watched it, the more I understood it and the more I loved it. This film, Heathers, falls into that category of either you understand it and you love it, or you don't understand it and you're just motorcycle. You don't understand it and you're not really a fan of it. I understand it. I grew to love it. It's such a great original concept of a film. The dialogue is very witty. I love the script so much. And it's a cult movie, not like a cult, not like an actual cult, but it's like it has a cult following. There you go. It has a cult following for a reason. It's such a unique film to come out of this time period. And I love the steelbook. There we go. The 3 Heathers on the back. I love that. All right. Number 7, I will be talking about this film on my live stream tonight because I'm ranking all of the Indiana Jones films. And my favorite, I just gave it away. Temple of Doom. I love Temple of Doom so very much because it just seems like it's nonstop action. I never get bored with this film. And this is what, number 7. I want to keep this on track for Tim while he's watching this video. Number 7, Tim, Temple of Doom. I never get bored watching this movie. I feel like once the movie starts, it's constantly going. There's always something happening. You're never bored. I'm never falling asleep. I love Short Round, Ke Huy Quan, absolutely fantastic in this movie. And I don't mind Kate Capshaw's character of Willie. I know a lot of people find her annoying. They don't like her. I find her entertaining. You want to know why? Because it's realistic. Do you really think that I'm going to go into a cave underneath a palace and there's going to be a million bugs crawling all over me and I'm not going to scream? Of course I'm going to scream. She was the most natural with her reactions and relatable, by the way. And that's why I think I adore this movie so much. It's just so good. It's so good. So if you got to have like a massive blockbuster, at least for me on my list, it's going to be Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. I think that's the only action film on my list, really. Okay, so that was 7. We're getting very close to the top 5. Exciting. So number 6, almost made the top 5, is Dirty Dancing. I mean, the soundtrack is classic, iconic. You have Patrick Swayze, those dance moves that are like so salacious back in the day. That was a lot to take in at 8 years old, but I did, and I watched this on repeat. Oh my gosh, I think out of all these, I might have seen Dirty Dancing the most, I gotta be honest. I freaking watched this so many times. But again, it's relatable because you have like the ugly duckling girl played by Jennifer Grey. And, you know, she's cute, but she's not like the thing. And then you have Patrick Swayze, who's just at the top of his game. He's so muscular and so attractive, and he finds her attractive, and you're like, whoa, what's this? You know, like, wow. It's like, you know, true love wins it all. You know, it's so good. It's just so good. Like finding random love on vacation with Patrick Swayze. Who didn't dream of that? You know what I mean? We all wanted that. We all wanted that when we were like 10. You know what I mean? I did. But anyway, I was going to say Patrick Swayze lands at number 6. Dirty Dancing lands at number 6. I apologize. This video is all over the place, but I'm having fun with it. All right. Here we go. Top 5. Top 5. All right. So, going into the top 5. Number 5, we have Pretty in Pink. Surprise, surprise, another John Hughes classic film. Again, another movie of love on opposite sides. You have Molly Ringwald, who plays the girl with not a lot of money, who's trying to scrape by and do with whatever she has, and she has a little job at a record store, and it's so cute. And then you have Andrew McCarthy, who I had a crush on back in the day, so that's a plus, who is the rich boy. And he has, you know, jerky best friends, and they have all the money, and they're just, you know, they're a-holes, and they're just mean and nasty. And you have Molly Ringwald, who's just a nice person. But my favorite character is Ducky. John Cryer, who plays Ducky, her best friend. I mean, how can you not love Pretty in Pink? I have seen this movie so many times, and I will continue. A lot of traffic today. I will continue to do so because I just love it. I love the underlying love story in this film. All right, number 4. Number 4, I chose Fast Times at Ridgemont High. This came out in 1982, so I was 2 years old when this first came out. And this is kind of like the more adult version of like John Hughes movies. Like John Hughes gave you a nice base of like, you know, nice innocent romance, but then this just ripped off that band-aid of innocent romance and shoved sex right in your face. You're literally dealing with the biggest situations in this film as a teenager, but it's realistic. It's realistic. You're dealing with sex and abortion and, you know, yeah, that's pretty much it. Sex and abortion in this movie and just other topics. This was a fantastic all-star cast that were unknown. Nicolas Cage also in this movie. This was before he was in Valley Girl. I don't even think he had a speaking part. He was just in the kitchen. But you had Jennifer Jason Leigh, Phoebe Cates, Judge Reinhold, and of course, Sean Penn as Spicoli. So iconic. If you don't have Fast Times on your list, what are we doing here? I mean, this is one of the 80s staples. And if you haven't seen this movie, get on it. This is the Criterion. The Criterion sale is happening right now. So pick it up. You have no excuse. All right, so that was number 4. Number 3. Number 3. This is getting exciting. Number 3 is, who are you going to call? Ghostbusters. And this is a slipcover from Side Hustle Cinema, just to let you guys know how fantastic his work is. There we go. So Ghostbusters comes in at number 3 on my list. It's such a fantastic comedy. At the time, I thought it was just such a great like fantasy. Like, this obviously could never happen. We're dealing with ghosts and we're dealing with dogs that, you know, like demon dogs. And those demon dogs, every time that they were on the screen running around, you know, Rick Moranis' apartment building, and then when they turn into the statue, those parts really scared me. And I still remember feeling like, oh my God, like every time I saw it, I was so scared during those parts. So that's a big reason why this one is really high on my list. But Ghostbusters is just one of those movies you can put on anytime and you have a great time with it. And the characters, the dynamic between the 4 leading actors is just so good. They're the best comedians of all time, and they're just so good at what they do, and it shows in this movie. And it has iconic images like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man and the dogs and Sigourney Weaver. Like, just so many things about this movie that are so memorable. And I'm just so happy that we kind of got back on track with the Ghostbusters franchise with Ghostbusters Afterlife. And I'm looking forward to seeing the next movie that they do put out. So Ghostbusters at number 3. All right. This is exciting. We are down to the top 2. In second place, the runner-up for the number 1 movie of the 80s for myself is Back to the Future. If you don't have Back to the Future on your 80s list, I don't know what to say. To me, this movie pretty much defines the 80s. There's so many things about this movie that are so fantastic. Very few movies out there I would consider a perfect film, 5 stars. There's nothing you could do to improve that film. Back to the Future, to me, is one of those movies. This movie is perfect. The concept of the film, time travel, the entire concept of going back in time and being with your parents when they are in high school and having that dynamic, and then the relationship between a teenager and like what, a 50 or I don't even know how old Christopher Lloyd is supposed to be in this movie. It looks like he's 86, but he's not. He's probably 50 or 60. But the relationship between a teenager and like a 50 or a 60-year-old, you would think would never work. And it does. It does. It works so well in this movie. And that is because you had these 2 actors, Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd, playing these parts. And I believe if those actors were not in those roles, it would not have been the same. And obviously I'm right, because initially Eric Stoltz was supposed to be Marty McFly, and it was not working. Something was off. He was too serious, and they switched him out for Michael J. Fox, and it was perfection. And I know that it's been said, Robert Zemeckis has said, he's put his foot down. This movie will never get remade. Never, ever, ever. And it doesn't need to. This is one of these movies you don't touch. You leave it alone. It's like The Wizard of Oz. It's like Jaws. You know what I mean? Like, you don't replicate classic films like this. You can't do it. You can't do it. Because this movie is so perfect and so iconic, you will never, never be able to live up to the original. So, Back to the Future in second place. All right, it's all come down to this. What movie do you think is my number 1? Well, it's probably very noticeable that I don't have a certain film on my list, and you guys already know I enjoy John Hughes. It's been on my list a few times. That's like the 4th motorcycle. What is going on outside? Anyway, you guys know I love John Hughes. He's been on my list about 4 or 5 times now. So, my number 1 movie from the 80s is The Breakfast Club. For me, it has to be The Breakfast Club. This movie means a lot to me. I said a lot of stuff about it a couple of videos ago when I was talking about my Rad 9 movies that made me. This movie really educated me about life. And I know I'm getting a little bit serious when I talk about this film, but it is necessary. Because when I was younger, this film came out in 1985. So I watched this, I think, for the first time, probably 8, 9 years old. When you're that young, you're not really thinking about super serious topics in life, like abuse or being ignored at home, your parents not being there for you. Because in my household, we didn't live like that. I had a great upbringing. I was very, very fortunate. This movie really educated me on how other kids are possibly living their lives at home. And I appreciate that because you didn't really talk about that stuff when we were at school. At least we didn't. We always talked about what teachers we hated or what movies are coming out, what we're excited to see, what are we wearing, what video games coming out, anything like that. We didn't talk about anything serious. Excuse me. We never talked about any serious topics. And when I put in this movie for the first time, I didn't necessarily understand those serious subjects, but I really understood you have 5 really different kids that are all stuck together in detention for an afternoon, and they're all relating to each other because they all have different problems. And then later on in life, when I watched this movie, when I got a little bit older, then I really understood the issues that they were dealing with. And it really just opened up my eyes to a lot of different subjects and topics. And besides that, it's just a great movie. I know some people disagree with me. Some people think this movie is boring. Everyone's with their different opinion, and I respect it, and that is fine. But to me, Breakfast Club just has a real meaningful place in my life, and I will always appreciate this movie. It's extremely well written, but it's not all serious. It has the comedy in there as well, which balances everything, and I think that is the brilliancy of The Breakfast Club. And as you can see, it is a Criterion, and the Criterion sale is right now, as I mentioned, with Fast Times, so no excuse. Go out and pick up The Breakfast Club as well as Fast Times at Ridgemont High. So those are my top 25 films from the 80s. Comment down below and let me know your thoughts about any of these movies. And also, if you want, put your top 25 list down below in the comments. I'll make sure to let Tim know that your list is there so he can count that for the gigantic live stream that he's going to have revealing the results of all of our lists. Very, very fun. So let me know your favorite 80s movies down below if you want to make a list or not. Don't forget to like and subscribe before you leave, and I'll see you next time.